This one nurse that I spoke with talking about leaving his village in Kenya, the village rented a bus. They all took him to the airport and dropped him off. And so he said, I just want you to know that you're not just changing my life, my wife's life, my son's life, but a lot of those kids in the village that can now go to school because they have money for uniforms and books and things like that. So again, it was just an amazing mission.
She went from starting her own international nursing staffing company with just one client to scale to be in 45 states and 70 countries, all while raising three daughters all on her own. Today's guest is Shari Constantini. Shari is the founder and former CEO of Avant Healthcare Professionals. She now sits on the board of multiple companies and recently joined Kismet Technologies, which is a safe antibacterial products company. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about how to go from a startup to a global change maker, how to overcome entrepreneurial obstacles, and money, how to raise it, how to scale it, and how that's going to impact your business and how you operate it. Stay to the end and get my summary of easy steps you can take to reach your goals as an entrepreneur or an investor. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to an Easy Step podcast. Here we bring you an inspiring person, message, or insight that will help you to take an easy step or a few toward living your best life. Now, here's your host, Court Potter, a former New York advertising executive turned real estate broker and entrepreneur who has always been passionate about learning what makes people successful. Thanks for spending time with us today. Now, let's get started with your easy step toward reaching your audacious goals.
Welcome, Shari, and thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Really excited. So last year you retired from a company you founded and grew to be one of the top nursing staffing companies in the United States. In a competitive industry, how did you even get started?
The way I came into being an entrepreneur was different than many. Many intentionally go into that. And I had been in the industry of international healthcare recruitment for 6 years, and just thought I could find a different way to do it. Some of that had to do with my clinical training as a nurse and just really wanting to provide a better service for both the clinicians I was bringing in from around the world and the hospitals throughout the U.S. that were receiving those folks. And what's interesting to me is I started the company with those competitive advantages, kind of our niche. And when I exited the company, we still had that same competitive advantage in terms of the clinical programming that we offered for our clinicians and our clients.
Great. When you got started, did you have a client that was already willing to work with you, or did you go out and just start from scratch?
I think that my path was a little bit easier on that level as well because I had been in the industry for 6 years. So my very first client was Johns Hopkins, who I'd worked with a previous company. And they agreed to give me a contract, but would not work with me until they had fulfilled the complete order at my last company. But that at least got the ball rolling as I went out to other hospital systems in the U.S. to have a client of that caliber.
Now, along your journey, did you have mentors and advisors guide you along the way, especially when you're first getting started? And how would you recommend people to get started on their entrepreneur endeavors?
I had some great business mentors that got me to the point of where I was when I started the business. I didn't really have any entrepreneurial mentors or figures that I was really looking towards and saying, oh, I'd like to emulate them, or I'd like them to give me advice on how to launch this business. And I highly recommend that because for me, I was really head down in the business. I remember when we went out and raised private equity money, I didn't have an investment banker. I had a corporate attorney that helped advise me, but it was really me and my COO at the time. And we did the best we could. We raised the money, and I think we got very good terms in the end. But, I now work a lot with entrepreneurs, and I really recommend to them to find mentors, to find experienced people in the areas that maybe they lack in terms of their strengths that can help provide them balance and insight and experience to make their journey a little bit easier.
Speaking of easy, when you started the business, you were raising three daughters on your own. How did you even navigate that in addition to starting a new company from scratch?
That was challenging, for sure. And it was funny because I was funny, ironic. I was listening to somebody talk about their exit and their entrepreneurial journey. And, he brought his wife up and she was his partner. And I was like, I could just bring my nannies up, right? Because they really gave me balance. But I had a couple things that I did with the kids. I'd go to one field trip a year. I'd always try to get to their sports games. And so for me, it was really trying to pick quality events that would really stick with them in terms of the time I was spending with them, because oftentimes it was limited between travel and starting a company and raising money and, really meeting all the challenges of that business over time.
Going back to the entrepreneur community, what did you find as though there are key elements that entrepreneurs can really find in today's age versus back then? And what advantages do you think that entrepreneurs should seek out when they're looking to start their own business?
So I started the business in 2003, and I was really head down on that business for many reasons. But, we grew pretty rapidly. In those early years, we went out, we raised money. The business was international healthcare recruitment of nurses, placing them into hospitals. And in 2007, those visas for nurses ended up backlogging for what was 7 years.
Wow.
We had a short backlog of visas in 2005, and it lasted 5 months. So we really had to pivot to a new service line. We had to get new clients. And so it was really very, very challenging. And in 2010, I really came up for breath. And I remember meeting somebody in the community that suggested that I go to the chamber with him. And the chamber at that point in time was very much focused on entrepreneurs. And it was called Orlando Inc. at the time. And I just found a great group of people and resources where I would go to some of their programs, and there were things that I could take away from those programs and plug into my business right away.
That's great.
And that was really the turning point for me, where I said, I need to be part of this community. I need to be active in this community. And eventually I need to give back to this community of entrepreneurs so they can maybe have an easier journey than I did.
Now, along that journey, what obstacles do you feel as though that you found that you had to learn in order for you to scale your business and to grow your business?
The first obstacle was money. I think every entrepreneur kind of comes to this point in a rapidly growing business where if you need cash, do you slow down that growth and grow organically at what you can fund, or do you go out and raise outside money? And, we chose to go out and raise outside money. It's, the business was very capital intensive because you would recruit these clinicians. They would be in your recruitment pipeline, so to speak, for almost 2 years before you would bring them into the U.S. and get any revenue from them. So you did have to spend a lot of money up front. So we went out and we raised that private equity money, and thank heavens we did, because Avant would not have survived the 7-year visa backlog if it weren't for that money that allowed us to have some cash to pivot to a new service line, to grow a new client base. And so that was a really important decision that we made, that I'm glad we chose the way we chose. And different entrepreneurs make a different decision at that point in time. I learned from that. Are there things I would do differently? Yes. But that's all in hindsight. And I guess that's a great place about where I am today, is I've had all of these hard lessons learned that I can either share with people to make their journey a little bit easier, or perhaps, put it to work in a new business or venture.
So when you went out to raise money, what type of funds or people did you seek? Did you seek out like venture capitalists? Did you seek out banks, and more corporate structures? How is that done in the entrepreneur, and especially when you've already established company?
Well, the full story is that when I thought about Avant initially, I thought, well, I'll go to a healthcare staffing company and start their international division, because I had done that at the company that I was at before I left to start Avant. But I couldn't find anybody that wanted to start this division in Orlando. They were all based outside of Orlando. And I had 3 little kids, and I just couldn't keep traveling at the rate that I was traveling and having an office someplace else. So it was really not the right decision for me. So then I decided to go down the path of raising money and found an angel investor that invested a significant amount of money. One angel investor putting $1.5 million in a business is not the norm. And that's what I was able to negotiate with my original angel investor.
And then you ended up moving on to other types of investors as you continue to grow the business.
Right. So we grew the business, of course, having some of those visa backlogs, helped really chewed up some of that cash that we had, and we needed more money, and we were growing much more quickly than we had anticipated. Our first year of revenue, we did $650,000. The next year we did $3.2 million, and then we did $7.4 million.
Wow.
So we were growing, but we were also filling that recruitment pipeline. And that's when we decided we would go out and raise private equity money. I had hired a COO that had done some fundraising more with private equity. We had pitched to some firms. We did our own dog and pony show. We went to Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, and met with some folks. And then I presented at the Florida Venture Forum. And between all of that, we identified actually a female-owned private equity firm, still a very rare rarity in private equity, but less rare than it was back in 2007. And they became our partner and stayed with us much longer than they anticipated because of the visa issues. But after 10 years, they had a very successful exit.
Now, when you were going and pitching these businesses, I'm sure you learned what that pitch process was and what they were looking for. Now, when you look at entrepreneurs, what type of structure or key elements do you look at when they're pitching their concept to you and their business?
Probably first and foremost is you look at value creation. So what's the scalability of that business? So when you look at scale, you look at the operation itself. Is it something that you can scale? But you also look at that total addressable market and what is the total opportunity. Now, what you ideally like to have is a niche, something unique about the business, like we had in international staffing, these clinical programs that we offered. I think I see more businesses now today that have some very novel ideas. And, so again, then with those novel ideas is what's the market, what's the scalability, what value creation can there be for investors?
Do you find investors have various, just like buying stocks or, different types of investment opportunities, they're looking for different returns and time frames in which they want to end up, having the return and or scale for each type of investment or entrepreneur initiative?
I have learned a lot about different private equity firms. I think that some of the big firms, they just go into deals knowing that about a third of their deals are going to be home runs and 2/3 won't. Fortunately, we didn't pick one of those private equity firms to be our investor. Our private equity firm was a small firm, invested growth equity, and wanted all of their investments to have solid returns for their investors, their partners, their LPs. And so I think, what they had told us was they wanted 3 times return. And they got more than that. They got about 5 to 6 times return on their money.
Were they anticipating within a specific time frame, like 5 years,
Yeah,
7 years?
Typically, private equity looks at a 3 to 5 year time horizon.
Okay.
we were the first investment in a 10-year fund. So we were out in the last year of the life of the fund. Now, they can roll those typically for about 18 more months, but beyond that, they have to start looking, do I move this investment from one fund to another? And then that creates some valuation and potential tax consequences and that kind of thing. So different firms have different return expectations. I'm now an investor in some VC funds, and they have a history of what they get as returns. And so, again, I think different funds have different return expectations. I think ideally all of them like that 3 to 5 year horizon. VC might want to go out quicker. Private equity may stay in a little bit longer. It just depends.
So since you retired last year, how do you see your next chapter, venture, book in your life? And is it more focused on the entrepreneur community or more of just traveling? How do you see this next?
The last several years at Avant, we had recapitalized the business, gave the exit to the private equity, and brought in a strategic partner. And so after being with the strategic partner 3.5 years, I decided that really wasn't for me. I wasn't looking for an environment where I felt like an employee after being an entrepreneur and growing a business for 18 years. So when I look at my next chapter, it's not with a company, it's not with a strategic. If I get involved with another company, it's going to be an entrepreneurial company. It's going to be a company that is going to raise money, professional money, either VC or private equity, because it's something I feel like I can add value to. I've taken some time since I left Avant. I did some interim work, which helped give me some clarity on what do I want to do next. I also read the book recently, Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooks, and that was great. It's Strength to Strength, finding success, happiness, and deep purpose in the second half of life.
I just ordered it.
Did you?
Yes, I heard him on Oprah's podcast, and I thought that it was just really insightful about like what is it that you want to do in your next chapter of life. And it's like reinventing yourself and recreating yourself at every age. But he specifically is focusing on like really retirees and where they want to go moving forward. And I just think it's brilliant.
It was a great book. It's at the perfect time. I actually had heard about it at an Entrepreneurs Alliance meeting. So the Entrepreneurs Alliance of Orlando has a lot of entrepreneurs that have exited businesses. And so several members were reading that book. And it just really spoke to me about, thinking about my next steps in life. Yeah. And one of the people who I've spoken with gave me this advice. He said, I live a curated life. And so what I do now is really on my terms. I, want to volunteer, I want to give back, and I may professionally want to be involved in businesses, whether it's on boards or more involved. And so it's really picking what you want to do and who you want to do it with. And, that finding deep purpose is really important to me. My years at Avant Healthcare Professionals, changing thousands of lives in countries around the world, it was such a gift.
That's amazing.
It's such a gift. Last week I got a Facebook message from one of the nurses that had just converted to staff, and she said, I just want to thank you for what you did with Avant Healthcare Professionals and how you've changed my life and so many other people's lives. And I think she was from Kenya and, probably has supported a whole family and maybe even a part of a village back there with the money that she remits. So the reach of that mission was just amazing.
So just to put things in perspective for people, Avant enabled people from international countries to then get their visas and then become nurses here in the United States, correct?
Right. So over the years, we recruited from over 60 countries, 70 countries around the world. we brought in those nurses, physical occupational therapists during some of those middle years when we transitioned the business. And then when I left, we were placing clinicians in about 45 states around the country, everything from small rural communities to large academic teaching institutions.
Wow. And then those people were able to then send funds back home and support families and even like communities that they came from. And that's just amazing. And you all were able to help them with their visas and help educate them as well, and then train them once they came here before they were actually sent out. Is that correct?
Right. So we did, it evolved over the years, but we helped them pass the licensure exams. Then we eventually gave them a virtual clinical program to help bridge the gaps between their practice overseas and practice in the U.S. And then we had a hands-on time in our clinical labs, simulation labs, before they got deployed out. And then we would really help our hospitals on the receiving end to understand clinical and cultural issues that they should expect in the transition and how they can best address those. But we did some podcasts during COVID when COVID first hit for our nurses on assignment, because it was a really low point in terms of morale. There were certain parts of the country being hit really hard, and the majority of the healthcare community out there was not doing surgeries. They weren't having COVID surges. And so people were very nervous. And so we started this, Avant Heroes podcast. And I remember this one nurse that I spoke with talking about leaving his village in Kenya. The village rented a bus. They all took him to the airport and dropped him off. And so he said, I just want you to know that you're not just changing my life, my wife's life, my son's life, but a lot of those kids in the village that can now go to school because they have money for uniforms and books and things like that. So again, it was just an amazing mission.
That's amazing. Yes. And speaking of mission, I think that what you've done in your, with your business and your first career, so to speak, is really just admirable for the impact that you've had, and not only being able to scale such an amazing company and business, but the impact that you've had on people in various countries and their lives and the communities. So I think that is just amazing. So job well done.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Courtney.
Really looking forward to seeing what you do with this next chapter in your life. And we'll have to have you back on and tell us all those ventures and businesses that you're investing in. And so we'll have to have them on and have their CEOs and founders and talk to them and how they're growing their scale.
Absolutely. That would be my pleasure.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shari.
Thank you.
All right.
So what's an easy step that you can take towards reaching your most audacious goals as an entrepreneur or an investor? A quick summary of some ideas and suggestions that Shari gave us is: first, connect with your local entrepreneur community or industry in which you're wishing to connect with and get into. Second is find a mentor. Once you find a mentor, know how you want to scale your company. Do you want to grow organically, or do you want to raise funds in order to grow at a much faster pace? If you raise funds, what kind of returns are those investors anticipating? And how will that affect how you operate your business? From hiring to firing to even what is your exit strategy once you bring in those investors? Thanks for joining me today. Please go to courtpotter.com for more tips and tricks on what you can do to help organize your life, or an easy step that you can take towards reaching your most audacious goals. If you like this episode, please like it and subscribe to An Easy Step, or please share with a friend so that they can take an easy step towards reaching their most audacious goals as an entrepreneur or an investor. Thanks so much. Till next time.